Mark Dindal, I always like to start at the start when I have these conversations. If you could introduce yourself to anyone who is watching who may not know you, and just talk a little bit about what it is you do, and more importantly, why it is that you do it.
Okay. Well, I'm Mark Dindal. I'm a director of animated films. Love this job because as far back as I can remember, and I do remember, I have a memory when I was 3 years old. My grandmother
Mm,
took me to Disney's Sword in the Stone. When I was three
wow.
years old, there was no internet. There wasn't even color television yet. So I uh, I went to the theater and I remember just being so amazed by this huge color screen with these
Mm,
beautiful drawings that were coming to life. And although I still remember, I knew they weren't real. I knew they were drawings, but they felt real, and they created a
wow.
real on the screen, and it created a world that I wanted. I remember just wanting to step into. Like I'd love to go
Mm,
step into that. I think you get to actually do that for real when you go to a place like Disneyland. You get to step into those. But I also get that feeling too when I visited productions that are doing stop motion. You see the little sets, and I imagine being very small and walking around those sets. There's something about a heightened reality, whether it's stop motion or animation that's drawn or in CG where you create a virtual set within
mm,
the computer that draws me into this field. I never really think about the fact that you're making it a frame at a time because that would
mm.
seem almost like one of those bad dreams you'd have as a kid. I've got to make this a frame at a time. There's just for me seeing something come to life that begins as an idea and then becomes a sketch and then starts to move in an environment. That's what I love about it. And I think that's why I've never lost the fascination for seeing that happen
Mm.
in the process.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you were so aware of it being a series of moving drawings at such an early age. Now, they do say Sword and Stone is the animator's movie, right? It's a movie really more for animators rather than people who, like, most people would gravitate towards something like The Jungle Book based on the story, whereas, like, Sword and Stone is much more like all those animators firing on full cylinders. They're all at the top of their game, you know? Is there like relevance to that film, or is it more just it's the first one that you saw?
Well, it is the first one I saw, but I also think for me, I remember thinking, he gets to become a bird, he becomes a fish.
Mm,
Um, there's the magic involved. Um, I've always responded to a mentor type figure that, whether they be magical or
mm,
just someone that comes into your life and influences it in a positive way. And it doesn't have to be just once. I feel
mm,
that several times in my life I've had that. I've been blessed to have that kind of person. Um,
mm,
Starting with my mom and dad. My dad taught me how to draw, and my mother just had uh, a tenacious amount of perseverance. So she, um, they're sort of my biggest support team. So in that movie, you're seeing Merlin help Wart develop into the king that he will be. And so
mm,
I like that sort of aspect. So I think it was both of those things. First one I saw, first first thing in color, I think I probably
mm.
saw first cartoon in color. And for it to have been on such a huge screen through 3-year-old eyes, I still remember it. So it obviously made an impression.
Yeah, I love seeing the threads of inspiration kind of filter through people's work, right? And when I look at the films that you've directed, Cats Don't Dance, Emperor's New Groove, cult classics, as they say, Chicken Little, and now Garfield. Apart from animals, right? Apart from anthropomorphized animals, there's a kind of an interesting thread of, someone really trying to find their place in the world. Do you know that kind of way? And I think that that seems to be a really interesting thread throughout your film. And here's something interesting then. You've got Garfield, who's a very established character, right? There's been years and years and years, so many different representations of Garfield. So I'm curious with this particular film, how did you guys approach um, creating this story? And there's multiple limbs, so I'm sure we'll get into this, right? But let's just start at that basic question first, and we can keep going from there.
Well, when I came on in 2018, I read a
Mm,
script um, where it was the foundation was Garfield meeting his father for the first time.
mm,
So in all the 45 plus years of the comic strip, we got to meet his mother in one of the specials, but we never met his father. And that idea was there before I came on, but I really responded to it because the one question I would have about Garfield before, even before reading that is what, to fill 90 minutes, what are we going to introduce about his character that we
mm,
don't already know, that we haven't already covered? Um, and so what I liked about that is Garfield. We know Garfield for his certain amount of confidence. He's got that sarcasm. John is usually the butt of his jokes. Like cats. They say cats allow you to live in their house, kind of thing. They think they're definitely in charge, and they put up with you. So there's a feeling that he is he's the one in charge, and he's controlling the narrative always. And
mm,
when his father comes into the story here, he gets thrown and gets spun around and gets pulled out of his comfortable existence and at home with John and Odie, and goes out into the world, which he maintains that he knows how to do everything, but we see that he actually doesn't so much. But you get to what I was interested in is you get to reveal that this character who's had all this confidence um, for all these years has this vulnerable human side to him as well.
mm,
And at the very end, when the situation requires, this lazy cat can get up off his couch and put his you know food aside and really be a hero for somebody that he cares about. So adding those two elements to the character, I think, was really
mm.
a fun thing to expand him into the feature world.
And you're also like bringing in new characters that haven't existed, like you said before. Especially introducing a father character, right? And this is a big thing because Garfield has been around for so long. You'd never seen anything like this. Did you? How is the collaboration then in terms of conversations with Paws Inc. And the kind of Jim Davis body corporation about introducing new characters into this world?
Oh, Jim was all for it. In fact, um I think this movie has been in development for almost 10 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm,
Our producer, John Cohen, uh, got the ball rolling on it. And I believe the idea of Garfield's father was there very early, many years before I came on. And Jim was all for it. He just was so supportive all the way through the process of taking this and adding to it.
mm.
And I really appreciate that because I think that it's it's just it just reflects a lot of confidence. I think in a someone who's created something to know that no matter what's done,
Mm,
what versions of a movie might be done, this body of work that he's done for 45 years will always be there. It's not going to
mm.
get erased. It's not going to be changed. Um, that's the way I look at it. Yeah, you'd have to ask him about about his point of view on it. He was
Yeah.
always very, very supportive and very much for introducing characters and expanding the world. And I'm really grateful for that.
It's you said that you came on 5 years ago, right? And it's been in development for about 10 years. So, yeah, talk to me a little bit through that then.
COVID, I'm sure it did with all productions, just extended the production
Hmm.
schedule as everybody, I'm sure on all productions had to rally to the challenge of doing this completely, in isolation from one another. And that's my only regret is that we didn't get to spend more time together because there's an energy that you create
Mm.
that on any collaboration of any kind when you can be together, um, you really get some momentum, and that's been one thing too that has always carried me through on these projects, and it distracts me from ever thinking that we're making it a frame at a time because there's just
Mm.
a lot of creative energy throughout the process.
Yeah. What stage were you guys at when COVID hit? Like what you were in full production or were you still kind of
Yeah, we had
around?
I think we had started.
Yeah.
I know we had a story reel.
Hmm.
I don't believe we had gone into animation yet, though.
Mm.
Still in the story process, but teeing up to get into production, and yeah, it's a little bit of a blur. It seems like it was. It seems like it just it seems I'm sure for everybody that's just a it's kind of a you lost track. Well, I lost track of days because where you lived, where you live and eat and sleep and work were all the same place. So
Yeah.
everything just kind of blended together into one. We'd often have to remind ourselves what day it was. And somebody would say, "Oh, happy Friday." And oh, it's Friday? It just, it was a bit of a surreal experience, but everybody was going through it at the same time. So, it wasn't just something you were challenged to deal with.
Yeah, because COVID is now 4 years ago, right? That's a good long time ago. So it that's why I'm curious about the time frames, and I kind of keep talking about that because obviously I understand development time, trying to get something off the ground. There's a lot of conversations right before getting your directors involved, starting to pick apart the script, create your story reels, and then once that's all locked and it gets down the pipeline, like that's when it kind of the G force kicks in and you're just like off, and that's why it's so interesting to me that COVID still, because I forget that COVID, you know, animated movies are still affected by COVID still because it's, you hear the stories of films that were nearly finished, but then COVID shut them down, or they were mid production and COVID shut them down. And they had to adapt and challenge, and how difficult it was because the people aren't there. You can't have the water cooler chats. You can't, where little innocuous ideas come about and makes things so much better. And that is a difficult thing to do. Do you think it ultimately impacted the the production itself, like in that idea developmental stage, not having the people like closeness? Do you know what I mean? I think physical closeness. Do you think it impacted it at all?
Well, I was just going to say it lengthened the process because
Ah.
what could happen? You get up, go to lunch. You're not intending necessarily to discuss something, but something just pops up, and there's a lot of spontaneous conversation that can erupt
Mm.
when you just go, "Hey, let's go get some coffee," and you think you're just taking a break, but many times when you're not thinking about it, a solution pops into your head.
Yes.
And when
Yeah.
you're there at the coffee machine with somebody and it pops into your head, you can act on it immediately. What we had to do in this case was uh, just schedule a meeting. So that some of that spontaneity we had to like schedule so that we could capture spontaneity.
Schedule spontaneity. Wow.
Someone has an idea and it was like, hey, let's get together. So it wasn't quite as spontaneous, but I think that's how we adapted. Um, we also had it's a global production. All of our
Mm.
the storyboard artists, the writers, and the production design character design. It's all in the US. So we were all local here, even though we were in our homes.
Yeah.
Animation was spread across Montreal, London, um, South America, Asia, India. So that's all over the world. And
Wow.
the
Yeah.
production things. So
Is
that
that
gets,
just because of DNEG as the company was spread around
yeah,
that
yeah,
amount? Yeah. Okay.
yeah. And so, scheduling spontaneity when you're global is more of a challenge. Um, and I'm sure every production deals with that. You just have to think, okay, well, it can't be like there's 100 of
Uh,
us under one roof. We've got to think differently. So it becomes a scheduling challenge. But
mm,
the day to day producer that I had on this, Craig Sost, who I've known for quite a while, going back to Disney, and our
mm,
production manager, Megan Malone, just were stellar at making those things happen. And,
yeah.
all the production support that we had in every department, they were really on top of it. And I think they are young people who are very facile with the computer. So it's not like I started before the internet and computers and anything,
Yeah.
where everything was just recorded in notebooks and things like that. So uh, so these solutions that they would come up with were really fun to see because that's the world they've grown up with, and so they think progressively like that.
Mm. I think then my next question, just based on what you're saying, would be how different was this production based on your previous ones in terms of like, right? So let's compare Cats Don't Dance to Garfield, right? It, what how much of Cats Don't Dance was done abroad? Just as a short question. Yeah.
Um, oh, I don't. Let me think back. We were all under one roof.
Yeah,
It was
exactly
a
right. So you're all
small,
under one roof compared to
usually.
and where it's like a
Yeah,
communication challenge, right?
yeah, yeah. Just because India, for example, is 12 hours ahead of you, and London
Mm.
would start their day when we ended our day.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
As you know, so
Yeah.
we would sometimes our hours would be from 7:30 a.m. till almost to midnight our time, so that
Yeah.
you could prepare something that when the people in London went to work, they had
Mhm.
their notes and things had been addressed so that they could work on that day. Because
Mm.
by the time I met with them, like we're doing now, was the end of their day. Again, when you're under one roof, Catstone Dance was a very small production team too, and
Mm.
the smaller the team, the more communication that you can have. I just like to walk around when you're on production, go to each person's room. There's scheduled meetings, but I just like to pop in and say, "Hey, how's it going? You got any questions?" Because
Yeah.
I noticed I remember when I was animating, especially when I would be doing in betweens in animation, which
Mm.
is less of the creative demand, and it's more of I mean, it's still creative because you've got to think properly. But for me, just relatively speaking, it would it would require less of that. And I remember my mind kind of wandering off into questions about the movie or problems that I might foresee. And so I know as you sit there and do work on animated movies, there's times where your creative capacity is not as taxed and your mind will start to think about issues with the movie. So when I would
Mm.
walk around, I would I feel like I might pop in when someone was going, oh hey, I was just thinking while I was sitting here about this thing, what do you think about that? And you could get those conversations to happen again sort of organically and spontaneously.
But I've been reading a lot about the kind of nature of creativity of late, and they say that obviously the best thing you can do is have busy hands and a free mind, right? And that's when you start to like because your active brain. I think I read a book John Cleese was talking about, and it's like the hare and the tortoise, right? So harebrained, uh, that is engaged when your hands are doing stuff. So it allows your tortoise mind to kind of just go off and figure out and wonder about solutions, and it somehow, because your conscious brain is engaged, the subconscious starts to flood through, right? And I think that's a really beautiful idea that you're able to capture that by popping into someone right while they're in the midst of that. Whereas with something like this, it's kind of much more difficult because you're not able to wander into whatever city in India they're in, to talk about this kind of stuff, or in London. Um. Anyways, that's just me agreeing with you. So
Yeah. When you before you mentioned John Cleese, I have watched his videos on creativity and read his book, and I feel the same way. There's something that I like to do, especially with animation, is and the types of animated movies that I like to make, where there's a sense of play always present,
yes, yes,
so that
yes.
your mind stays open. Um, Again, more of a challenge when we're just on little Zoom squares.
Yeah.
But we would often just, you can kind of feel, I think it was just sort of a natural thing when we'd be in a room and we were racking our brains, we would just naturally gravitate towards some sort of playful kind of break. And almost without fail, by the end of our scheduled meeting, an idea would pop into somebody's head, even if it was in the last 3 minutes
Yeah.
of that session. And it just it's hard. For me, I speak for myself, it's very hard to be creative if you're very, rigid and tense, and you know
Mm.
trying to stick to a schedule. I always keep it in mind because I want to be responsible. I don't want to just goof off all day long. But I know we got 10 to 11 here for this meeting. Then all right, I keep an eye on the clock. But there's just some times when we got to get up and run around the table or something.
This
Or to
sounds
sing
like
along, do
crazy.
something.
Yeah, just something different to break
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But the idea of play, it's so central, right? And I think people forget that, like how important it is to create a space where you feel safe enough to be yourself, to allow the playful attitudes to come out, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do, and it can be problematic in animation because when the pipeline hits, everything is measured, everything is done to a specific degree. You might get creativity through retakes and stuff like that, but generally most of the play, the innovation is figured out while you're boarding, while you're writing, all that kind of stuff. And once the animators come in, of course they're all bringing their flair and creativity, and it's wonderful, but they're pretty segmented. Like it becomes very rigid, that whole system. So how do you then allow play to flourish in those kind of moments?
Well, I try to keep it. I just try to keep it alive throughout the process.
Hmm.
Very much, as you get further down the production you go, the tighter the constraints get.
Yeah.
With schedule and budget and things like that. So I always keep it in mind. But again, with the kind of movies that, or the subject matter that I like to
Mm.
explore, has a certain level of um, fun, imagination, absurdity, um, uh, things that defy logic. But I feel like that's okay. A cat can drive a truck. We're just going to go with it. Because they're walking around on their hind legs and talking. So I mean,
Yeah.
let's just go with that. Um, Certain subject matter, that is not, doesn't work, and is problematic. But the types of things, like you said, when animals talk and coexist in the world with humans. In our movie, the humans can't hear the animals talk, but like in Cats Don't Dance, they could, or Looney Tunes, they can hear. So there's just, I don't know, it's sort of a cartoon reality that
Mm.
that I love. Again, I just love a heightened reality that I can't walk outside and experience. So if I want to step into that world, I've got to watch a movie, and I love that quality about movies. I actually love movies that are shot all on sound stages, like Mary Poppins or Rear Window. There's just a heightened reality to them, and
Mm,
um, so I feel like in order to keep that imagination, stoking the fires of everyone's imagination, you got to try in some way to keep that playfulness going, um, regardless of where you are in the schedule. And I don't know. I think I just over the years have sort of developed a knack for keeping it going, but also being responsible to the budget. Uh,
yeah, well, yeah, very important. It's
those are
important.
to me, those are two realities that
Yeah.
sometimes would appear like they don't really they don't blend. It might be a little oil and water, but I think I've been happy with the success that I've been able to kind of strike a balance on these
Mm.
films. You know, again, just more challenging on Zoom, but we still got it even when we were working with the people over in Europe and India and Asia, other continents as well.
Well, a real when you talk about the idea of play and altered realities of play, where films just create their own logic. Emperor's New Groove is that all over. That film is just an explosion of that. Um, but that begs the question then. This lands on Mark Dindal's desk. What attracted you to Garfield? How did you come across it? Like, what was the process on coming on board?
Well, so I read a script in 2018,
Hmm.
and the script at that point had the emotional foundation of Garfield meeting his father for the first time,
Hmm.
and the first time in 45 years, never in the comic strips or the specials. And I really liked that element because one of the questions I had even before I read the script is how can what sort of
Mm.
facet are we going to reveal about this character in this movie? Because I feel like the demands for a 90-minute feature requires uncovering something about a character that you hadn't seen before.
Mm.
So that element was already there, and the potential for the vulnerability of the character, who again always feels like he's completely in charge, to be thrown out of his comfort zone, out of his element, and to be able to see that he has this vulnerable human side to his personality that you wouldn't readily assume
Mm.
just from the comic strips. And so that gave us an opportunity to uncover this and see what that was about. And so I think that, plus the fact that it's very much animation IP. From reading the comic strips, Jim will be broad and cartoony with expressions. He'll break the fourth wall. He won't worry about logic necessarily.
Mm.
He's a huge fan of that imaginative process, so I knew that would be an element. So anytime you can, for me, where those two things exist, sort of this heightened imaginative reality and a cartoon potential for sort of cartoon sensibilities, and the potential for to anchor it in some emotional resonance. Those are the two things I think that I immediately
Mm.
start doing anything.
It's funny you talk about the Garfield as a character because, as far as I know, and you've talked to Jim, but Garfield was designed to be a very commercial character. The origins of Garfield is just pure commerciality. To see if you can create this character that will appeal to the broadest base possible. And all the design choices in Garfield from very early on, even to how the books were designed to be landscape rather than portraits, so they stick out a shelf, right? And the force them up the very top, so people see that first, and they're like, "Oh, what is this?" Did you guys at all think about that in terms of the origin space of Garfield, uh, the commerciality of him, right? Because it's a very specific design. Lots of kids draw Garfield as their first character, you know.
I think that I always felt like Jim did the heavy lifting on that for us and gifted it. And it was just up to us um, to bring that into 2024, but in a way where you could have Garfield be able to use some modern technology. But and I think that's the biggest challenge
Mm,
is taking the essence of him, bringing it in today, and getting the right balance. And we went back and forth quite a bit on that, and had previews to test sort of whether we got the chemistry right on those things. Um, but that I think that's what I was focused most on because
mm,
uh, you don't want to just take something and just name and design and then create a whole new persona, because it's so established and so well loved the world over. So I think that's I feel like Jim gave us a very strong
mm.
foundation in that respect, and it was just up to us to carry the torch.
But a lot of that then comes through delivery of the personality, not just through the animation, but through the voice as well, right? And we've got some pretty interesting voice choices on this as well, I would say. How much involvement did you have in regards to the casting?
Oh, I was involved from the very beginning uh,
Mm,
with our producers and our core creative team in in making those choices. And one thing that we
mm,
do is you take sound clips from actors from interviews or movies, TV shows, and we just cut them against drawings of each of the characters to see if it feels like that voice is coming from this character. And so that was a process we did early on as we explored all of the characters. And in each
mm,
case, when we cut these sound bites to the characters, each character with the actors we ended up with that we cast, there's just something where it just fits. I don't
mm,
know how to describe. You just go, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That feels good. And and then we just went from there. Yeah, when I saw our cast, the pictures of all the actors on one press release, I was like, wow, look at this amazing group of actors. What a live action movie this would make if they were all in
yeah.
a movie together. So it was really a joy. The recording the actors is one of the phases in the long production schedule that really injects new energy and life into
Mm,
the process because they are so good at what they do. Every one of our actors could ad lib lines and refine them to make them more specific to each of their characters. And I always encourage that because that's what they do. They know how to do that, and so it's really fun. Always came away from every recording session with, like I had an energy drink to continue the next round of production.
yeah, some kind of engine boost just to kind of
Yeah,
get you over the humps. I know what
yeah,
you mean.
yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Well, I think that's my time, but I really appreciate your time, Mark, and your thoughts, and I appreciate your films even more. Cats Don't Dance. It's funny. I have a podcast about animation called Animators Breakfast, and the very first episode that I have, it's like I talk to creatives and they pick a movie that inspired them. And the
Mhm.
first guy I had, he was between Iron Giant and Cats Don't Dance. He was just
Oh,
like, I don't know what to pick. Now he picked the Iron Giants. So I'm sorry to tell you, but it's there, It's and especially Emperor's New Groove. People love that. I've got a drawing of Kronk up on my wall here that Tony Bancroft did for me,
oh,
which is very
wow, that's
yeah.
great.
So
Yeah,
I'm very lucky, but and now Garfield as well, and of course Chicken Little. But thank you so much for everything. I
yeah, thank
appreciate all that.
you. Really nice
Yeah.
talking with you. All
Yeah, you
right.
too.